Alrighty, hello, my high schoolers, perhaps grade 8s, and maybe grade 7s. In this lesson today, we will be reading and learning about a very popular poem. You probably have already read this poem in school. And if you haven't, I am sure you will come across it. I'm 100% sure you'll come across it. Matter of fact, you're coming across it right now. Robert Frost, the author or the poet behind the poem, is an American poet, often talking about cultural, philosophical ideas, especially about rural America and growing up there. Hello, my high schoolers, perhaps grade 8s and some grade 7s. Welcome to this lesson where we will be exploring and diving deep into one of the most popular poems. Matter of fact, I'm sure you've already come across it. If not, I'm confident you will. And there you go, you actually are coming across. If you haven't come across it in school, keep an eye out for it. But this is a very great poem. But this is actually a very good poem, written by Robert Frost. He's an American poet. The poet behind the poem is an American gentleman, often talking about cultural and philosophical ideas in his poetry. And a lot of it has to do with rural America. So in this poem, The Road Not Taken, we will read through it together and then So in this poem, The Road Not Taken, we'll read through it together, and then there are some questions to get us to think more about some of the themes and ideas underlying and stretching out throughout the poem. So, so we'll be reading this poem together. I'll give you some time to read it on your own first, and then there are some questions to get us to think a little bit more about the underlying themes, the author's tone, and the meanings behind this great poem. So take your time now, read some of it. So take your time now, read through the poem, and I'll be back and we'll read through it together. So take some time to explore through this poem right now on your own, and I'll be back and we'll look at it together. The roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Excellent. So, what is the extended metaphor here in this poem? That is our first question. What is the extended metaphor? Of course, we know a metaphor is when we are comparing more than one thing to each other that seemingly have nothing in common, but we find what they do have in common and we compare them in order to, I mean, what's the purpose of a metaphor? The whole point of a metaphor is to allow the reader to understand the imagery better. The whole point of a metaphor is to allow the reader to understand the feeling, the quality, to engage the senses and the imagination with what we are saying. So if we're comparing, we're saying the sky was as blue as, if we say outside was as cold as a freezer, we don't mean that there's frozen pizza and there's ice cubes and there's all kinds of things that we might find in a freezer outside. We're only taking the cold aspects of a freezer and the coldness of outside to show that it felt like it was frosty everywhere. There was snow. There was nowhere to go. It felt maybe trapped like a freezer and it was just extremely cold. That's what we're talking about when we are comparing two things. Not that they have too much in common, but we find an element of commonality between them and make the connection. What's the point of the metaphor is to engage the senses so the reader can read it and really feel, so the reader can have an idea of what it's really like the author is trying to convey or say. Another common example could be taken from Shakespeare. All of life is a stage. Now, of course, we're not saying that life is a literal stage and we have to come up and have our lines rehearsed and performed. Da, 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 da. We are simply saying everybody is a character. We wear different masks when we're talking with our friends, or maybe if we're talking to a teacher and with our parents. We play different roles as if we're actors on a stage. When we go to work, do we behave the same as when we're in bed? I hope not. So, that is a metaphor extending to life and theater. So, that is a metaphor extending to life and to theater. But they don't have too much in common other than what the person who is saying the metaphor makes them have in common. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And so extended metaphor continues throughout and it unravels more and more as we continue reading. So, what is the extended metaphor here in this poem? Of course, it's the fact that. So, what is the extended metaphor here in this poem? Before we answer the question, I want you to have some time on your own to complete these questions, and I'll be back. So I want you to analyze each question to that degree. Take some time. I want you to answer each question to that degree. Take your time. There's no time limit with this one. Answer each of the questions to the best of your ability, and I will be back to discuss them. And I will be back to discuss the answers with you. Okay, I am back. Okay, I am back. The extended metaphor in this poem has to do with life being like a journey, coming across all different kinds of paths, and each path is an extended metaphor to a decision we might make. So, if we decide to go to university and become a doctor, of course, we can look down that path, try to see as much as we can until we can't really see anymore, and simply decide to go down that path. Even if not everything is clear to us in that moment from when we make the decision. But once we make the decision, we know that we will rarely never come back to that same point and decide between whether we want to do become an artist or a lawyer or to become a doctor. If we pursue one path, we must stay on it to see what it has to offer us. And so that's kind of what he's talking about as well. He knows he won't come back to that point again, and so he chooses the path and tries to see as far ahead as he possibly can. The fork in the road where the two paths diverge, that happens very often when we make a decision. We make one simple decision if I'm going to stay home today and play video games or go to the park and read a book with my friends. And so our evening is determined by the decision we end up taking. And so it's an extended metaphor to life or simply decisions we make on an everyday basis. And so, what did he decide? Number two, on what basis does the speaker choose his path? And so, this is actually covered in about 3 or 4 lines in the poem. Let's look back on the poem. Over here, then took the other as just as fair. So he took both paths as having the same amount of value and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. So, one path didn't look like anyone has walked on it before. And so, to the author, that was actually quite exciting. There was a path that not a lot of people went on. And this is really common experience when we're walking in a park and we see a little trail made don't you feel enticing? Doesn't it feel enticing to walk down? Maybe to see where it leads. It might be a little creek down at the end. And so I always like taking those paths, but make sure it's safe. A lot of the time, actually, there's spider webs in the summertime and you don't see them. So you're walking down a small little path and then you get caught in a spider web. My least favorite activity in the summer. That's my least favorite thing, probably. That's my least favorite thing. But that doesn't stop me from going down the small paths. Okay, so we have this over here. One path wanted better claim. And so he took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. But what has led him to take that path? Well, it was grassy and wanted wear. It was just enticing to him that this is a new path. He can be the first or one of the first to walk down and give him new life and a new experience. Number three, what do you think is the theme or main message of this poem? Now, of course, number three, what do you think is the theme or main message of the poem? What Number three, what do you think is the theme or main message of this poem? And of course, this can vary, and the answer is quite different for each person because it can speak to them differently. To me, and if you have something along the lines, including anything like challenging yourself, by doing something that isn't expected or the norm a lot of the time that most people walk down, and creating your own path in a certain way. That is usually always more rewarding. So instead of maybe also the fact that there's always more than one way to get something done. If somebody wants to accomplish task A, there's so many different ways to go about it. If somebody wants to accomplish a certain task, there's so many different ways to go about it. If somebody wants to become a fashion designer, a lot of them, if somebody wants to become a fashion designer, a lot of people go to art school and they develop the techniques, they develop their style, eventually get people to have their clothes on, have photo shoots, and eventually become a fashion designer for a long list of clothing items, have a fashion runway show. But a lot of the time, it could be someone just working in their room every day, creating different pieces, trying them out on themselves. People will reach out to that person. How much for this? I really love it. So many different ways to become a certain thing or to get something done. And to the author, of course, when he sees that path that not a lot of people take, if everybody goes to school to become this thing, hmm, maybe I can go to school, get the best education, get the best kind of thinking, but also maybe I can go to school, but also I can learn more while I'm in school about things that I'm interested in outside of school. So I can embark on these other journeys intellectually, mentally, read about philosophers, even if you're studying medicine, read about theology, read about anything that interests you about politics. And so not too many people take down. And so having your own journey to embrace your own so having your own journey, embracing your own life, because we're all very different. We're all unique creatures and we all have different interests, passions. And so going down a road that not many people have taken is what we do when we're being true to ourselves and follow our intuitions, that gut feeling, which we know. If you know, you know. But if we know it, a lot of the time we can feel it and it is right. And so to me, that's kind of what he's getting at here with this poem. And also that time just keeps going forward. So we make the decision, we'll never come back to that point again. We can always choose to change our paths. That could be another crossroads. But these crossroads continuously happen and happen without end. And this is the journey of life. But these diverging points happen again and again in life, and that's just but these diverging paths happen again and again in life, and that's just what happens. Diverging. And the diverging paths. Is the speaker satisfied with his choice? How do you know? This will be found in the last of the poem. He took he took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And so, do we know if he's happy with it? He's maybe glad he took the path less traveled by. Hmm. Oh, I kept the first for another day. So one of the paths he kept for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So he knows if he chose a certain path, way leads on to way, and he will keep walking. And he doubted if he'll ever come back to that other one, even though he kept it for another time. Now, he accepted that he went and chose one path, And so it doesn't seem to me that he has regrets over choosing it. He just knows he probably won't come back to that diverging point again to make a decision. It might be another diverging point down the line, like we just talked about, but it won't be that same point he was at. And so I would say he was satisfied because he took a challenging path not many people traveled by, and that's made all the difference in his life and his journey. And of course, the extended metaphor is that it's his life, but we can say it made a big difference for his walk in the park as well. Okay. And of course, how do you know? Make sure to find some examples in the poem. Make sure to find some examples in the poem for the how do you know part of the question. So you can say in the third paragraph, second line, the author or the poet, blah, blah, blah. Number 5, why do you think the poem is called The Road Not Taken instead of The Road Less Traveled? Very interesting question. So he decided to call it The Road Not Taken. He emphasizes that he came across a road that is not taken. And what is he encouraging the readers to do? Whenever we do come across these decisions or these life paths, maybe it's best for us to take the road that has never been taken before and create our own way, to make a way where there was no way, so that other people can follow in our footprints and footsteps. If he were to name the poem The Road Less Traveled, sure, there's always roads that are less traveled than others. There's the main roads, there's the common highways. Everybody travels to get to their destination on that. But if you were to call it the road less traveled, would it be as enticing, or would it be as enticing than the road not taken? By calling it the road not taken, it's kind of like a call to action. That's how I feel about it. It's like a call to action for us to take that road. You take that road that has never been taken before and forge your own path. That's how I feel it. But if you were to call it the road less traveled, it doesn't really entice or cause any excitement in the reader. It's simply a road that not a lot of people travel, but it's still traveled. It's just less traveled. And so what's the case for taking that road? But if it's a road that's never been taken, of course, go on the hero's journey. Take that road and see where it may lead. It might be the harder path, but it is more rewarding. And as he says in the poem, it makes all the difference. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Very great poem. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Of course, this has to do with the poetry and creative writing section of school and the curriculum. I hope to have more of these. Watch out for them. And I hope you learned something new. It's really awesome to even write down your own poem. It could be 3 lines. It could be 3 lines about anything. Try to simply write a creative few sentences about anything you might feel or see or that the senses might capture. It's always a great exercise, and anyone can do it, really. It's a skill we can all learn. It's a skill we all can learn. Also, a little challenge for you is to write your own poem. It can be as long as you want, even just 3-4 lines long. Write about anything you might see in the day, something that might inspire you, maybe a feeling you're feeling, maybe a feeling you're going through or processing, or perhaps it's something just the senses, your 5 senses in all their activation have experienced, and you want to write that. And so writing a poem, just a few lines about it, can really capture that feeling or that experience you've had and just carve out a piece of time for it. And to just carve out a little, and to just carve it out and put it in writing. And it will stay there on paper. until you want to revisit it, make some changes, or maybe add to it. So I always I always like to encourage creative writing. It's a great process, and also just journaling in general, especially writing down your dreams. I know we're getting far way ahead every year, but writing down your dreams, especially when you first wake up in the morning, to have a journal or a notebook next to your bed can be a very useful exercise to remembering your dreams. And you might later understand after writing them why you had the dreams. Hmm. So explore creative writing, explore journaling, and explore poetry. It's really awesome, and it's like fresh air and oxygen. And sometimes, I mean, a lot of the times, there's a great deal of wisdom found in them. The greatest poems, the greatest poets, and the greatest poems exist for such a long time for a reason. So I encourage you to dive deep into them. All right, everyone, I'll see you in the next lesson. Good work today. And I hope that I can see. All right, everyone, I'll see you in the next lesson. Good work today, and I hope I could see some of your answers.